Okay, it says live. Yay!
We are live.
Hi.
Yay!
Hello.
Okay. So this is, MB, do you have any idea what number this is? Of interviews we've done. I feel like it's
This is the 4th interview, but the 5th live because we did a reading for one of them.
And then
Right
we
on.
interviewed each other for the first 2.
Yeah, so that's 1, 2, Angela, and 4.
There you go.
Okay, cool. Well, why don't we just jump right in there? Since we did some of the talking beforehand, we don't need to bore people with that stuff. Not that it was boring.
It's just our crazy selves.
Yeah. Would you want to introduce yourself and say how you are connected with us, like how you know me, how we met, and then also say what the word empath means to you personally?
Okay. Yeah. So I am Terry. I'm also known. Well, I go by UA on Facebook. To put the long story short, my dad is also named Terry. So, and the way that his photo is framed, he would add people that I knew on Facebook. So we get messages constantly of like, "So, why did you unfriend to add me again? It doesn't make sense." And so I'd be like, "Do you want to look at the picture and see who it is? You might want to double check that before you say that." And they're like, "Oh, is that your dad?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's my dad."
Junior or something, and it might help.
So then I changed it to Yue because I figured, okay, my Chinese name, like people who I know in elementary school, that's how they knew me. So it'd be easier. But now, and I don't mind it because it's fun. People be like, "What does Yue mean?" And it's the name that I got from my grandma in Singapore. It's a Chinese name and it means strong of heart. And so it's like, I'll just go with that to honor like my grandma and to like honor my family history and heritage and do that. I met Hillary through Shane and through his shows. We were going to do a show until COVID decided to put a dagger into that, unfortunately. And yeah, so mainly through the theater scene. We've also talked, I think, somewhat about writing. You've told me a bit about your book. I haven't really talked a lot about my writing, but that's a whole other thing. And then in terms of empath, if I'm honest, I kind of struggle with that term just because I feel like there's so much different ways that people describe it in their own experience and how they feel. For me, it's really just being aware of, so being an empath is being very empathetic and understanding to other people's plight and their perspective, in the sense of it's like you can kind of sense someone going through something, you can feel something's different, and you kind of absorb it in a sense of like, it can get pretty overwhelming. So there have been times where like I want to be able to help people, but then when you hear it, you kind of feel like you shut down because it's a little overwhelming and it just takes over. And then and then it makes it to where like you're kind of radio silent for some people. I feel like that aspect has been a double-edged sword because I think I've lost friendships as a result of that. And I've never known how to articulate it fully, because it's one of those things where it's like, how do you articulate that? Like, you feel things in a way that it's like, even if you're not trying to absorb it in that way, it still just happens naturally. So where like you start to shut down, and it's not intentional. It never is. It just like you need to recharge. So for me, like I think of somebody who's an empath who's very compassionate and very understanding, and is also very aware of a lot of things, to where it can come off as anxiety, overthinking, or it can lead to that too. And that's something that I think is what makes it hard to describe us, because I think people have different levels of being an empath and different tunings of being an empath.
Oh, yes.
So,
I completely agree with that.
So
I actually had a question while you were talking. It just popped in my head. Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
I actually like to consider myself an ambivert, which is like a mixture of the two. There are a lot of times where I'm very much like I feed off of energy. Like when we're doing like theater or when we're doing like Zoom plays, I can tell the difference of how much I rely on that energy and feed off of it. But then there are definitely days where I just want to hole up and just be in my own space and just take the time to like recharge and allow myself to try to practice self-care, which I've always had a hard time with, but I'm aware that it needs to be done. So it's like, let me just take this time for myself so that way I can give that energy to other people or like be able to like spend time with people.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the same, an ambivert, or however people say it. Yeah, because it's because it's also depending on the kind of people you're with. Because if you're with a bunch of people you feel safe with and comfortable with, you're going to be more outgoing and crazy and silly and all of that. But then if you're with people that you don't know very well and you're not sure of their energy, or you don't, and then if you're with your family, that creates, childhood baggage that would go along. It just depends on the people that you're with.
I've definitely noticed that, like with my family, I'm very different than when I am with like my friends or with people who are close to me. It's not, and again, it's not intentional. It's just like, it just kind of comes out that way where it's like, yeah, this is kind of just how I function, how I get through this. Like, not to put them on blast, forgive me, mom and dad, if you ever watch this at some point or another, but the thing that I've been dealing with, and I think I've talked to Hillary about this briefly, is like my family and I have a lot of differences in terms of ideology, whether it comes to political, religious, whatever it may be. And there are times where it's trying to learn how to, sorry, give me 1 second, let me close my door. Okay. Someone watching something in the background. Okay. I was my friend and I have been watching Steven Universe today because he wanted to show me that show. Love the show, it's beautiful. But anyway, so to get back to that, like my parents and I, we definitely have a lot of discussions that lead into debates. Like it's a lot of just back and forth of like kind of trying to, for me, I hope I come off as like trying to present to them my perspective as reasonable and as kind as possible. But I know that with them, I may or may not have somewhat of a shorter fuse when I talk with them, because it's constant dealing with not just like those discussions, but like over time, like our past experiences and how that has shaped me when I'm around them versus like other people who are much more in my mindset of like compassion, trying to spread kindness, trying to just like talk reasonably with it and just feed off of each other where it's a healthy discussion. And so I hope I didn't lose what I was trying to get at. Yeah, I totally feel what you're saying. Like it's almost like natural to switch into those different phases. It's not any less true of my version of who I am. It's just a part of me, an aspect.
Yeah, like we're not consciously trying to be different people with different people.
Yeah.
I could have used different words, but yeah, so it's just like people bring out different aspects and different sides of you, and it's just you're still always who you are. It just varies depending on the type of energy that you're around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just gonna go through questions because
sure.
And then if it just flows, then I'll stop doing the questions and just what comes to my mind.
No worries. No worries at all.
Okay. So how do you experience being an empath in the world? And if you prefer me not to say empath or some other word.
No, it's fine. I think, I don't know if this is like an experience for other people who have been labeled as an empath or identify as it. I think I struggle with being with my own self, like the journey of being an empath, just because I'm always wondering if I am or not. Just because I wonder if it's just being a compassionate person or really just trying to understand people more than it is like the idea of being an empath. For me, in my own personal experience, what I feel very happy about, and it always makes me feel happy, is that I feel like I hope I have people feel like they can trust talking to me about things and working through things. And as an empath, I struggle with knowing, or not an empath, but maybe just as a person, I sometimes struggle with like knowing how to provide, either give advice or like to say something. So sometimes I like to just listen and just kind of allow myself to be a wall for people to bounce stuff off of, just because it feels like that's a lot better. Because I know for me, like when I'm going through something, it's like I'm saying stuff, and it's allowing me to see what I'm saying to get to the root of what I'm dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so I kind of like the idea of like, at least let me be that support beam or like that foundation to lay stuff down on so you can see what you're going through, and I'll just provide the support in whatever capacity you need. If you want me to say something, I'm happy to like provide any input, but for the most part, I'm happier just to listen and to allow you the space to tell me what you're going through. So if you think you can come up with a solution, or if it's just like you want to bounce it off someone, then go for it. So
yeah,
I completely. Oh, sorry.
You go first. I talk too much anyway.
Like, I completely agree with what you're saying, because I am that person. I want to be that person that people can bounce ideas off of and figure out what they need to do. I mean, I'm basically a sounding board for Hillary.
Wait, oh, there we go. There we go.
Person in this over there.
The one.
The person
the
right there. Hey, I got it right this time. There we go. Right there. There we go.
But that's more of like the person that I feel like I am, is because everyone has told me you are a great listener. I'm like, it's just who I am. I didn't have to practice this. This is who I am, who I've become as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What I was going to say was more about what you had started to talk about, not in the middle and the end, but about having doubt of potentially being an empath. I feel like it's still kind of a fairly new word for people to be using. So that's also, hard to know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly in my journey, when I was starting to embrace, oh, okay, that I resonate a lot with that. I think that I am that. I joined groups on Facebook for support and stuff like that. And somebody basically, in not so many words, told me that I wasn't one and I needed to do more research. And they claimed to be an empath as well. And so I was already really new to the, okay, I think this is what I am. And then for somebody to be like, you need to do more research. You don't suffer enough to be considered an empath. I have all of these different things. I have all of these different levels, which then also goes to what you were saying, that there's different levels, which I also completely agree with. And I might just be at a lower level and she might be at the top level. But also if you're at the top level, you wouldn't be hurting other people, because it's you're finding an identity that, means something and you need. And so, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I live with someone, too, who I would definitely say that she's an empath 100%. Everybody goes to her for advice. She's someone that will take the time. Honestly, she's an amazing woman. I'm so glad she's like a sister to me. And, she's the type where she doesn't show how she feels from it. She does a lot of, like, guarding herself in a sense of, like, she holds it back. So it always reminds me of, like, when it comes to people, like, who are empaths, some people are good at hiding it, and we don't know the full story of how much it affects them and how it impacts them. And it again further leads into the idea of, like, we don't know what battles everybody goes through. Like, we only assume what we think we know, and then sometimes people might make inferences and think that they know what you're going through, but we never really know, because some people want to hide it. Sometimes maybe they feel like it's not a big deal because people have brushed it off before, or maybe they feel like they shouldn't be making it a big deal, all these things. But, like, everyone's struggles are valid in their own right, because we all face them in our own ways, and it can be tough. Some things are tougher for others because of what they've been through before and what traumas they've experienced, and some other people have a resilience like no other. But, like, to hear someone say that you should be suffering more to be empathetic, or even just to be an empath, it hurts, because it's like, you shouldn't have to hurt to be an empath. You shouldn't have to struggle to be an empath. You can still have the heart of a saint and not struggle, and be a good listener, or be someone who can be there for someone and still be an empath, and not have to, like, make it a thing. It's not like I suffer more than you, therefore I'm a better person. I think that that's difficult. I think that that's I'm stumbling for words, but I find it disheartening, because it's like, if you can be a compassionate person without having to hurt others or to feel like you're constantly hurting. I think that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I personally feel like, in my opinion, if you're an empath, you understand what it feels like to be hurt, whether you've experienced the hurt yourself or you've felt it from somebody else being hurt that you care about. Because it's more for me like, it's mostly intense when it's somebody I care about. I can handle it more if it's somebody I don't know, I'm just passing on the street or whatever. But yeah, it's oh my God, I'm losing my train of thought.
It's all good.
Yeah, it happens all the time. What were we doing the other day, MB? We're like, bye-bye.
What was that? I don't know, but it happens a lot.
I think it was the last video we did when we were not being as focused on the empath and like talking about our hair.
Something. I don't know. It might have been one where we read the chapter and then we were talking afterwards.
Yeah.
I think it was in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it was about it was about her invalidating how I was. I think that's what it was, is that I personally feel like if you're an empath, you understand what it feels like to experience pain. And so you would never want to cause somebody else that kind of pain. So, and again, she never said it in exactly those words, but that's the meaning behind it that I felt. It was like, oh, well, you should do some more research because I'm an empath and I have all of these things and I suffer all of this time. And so you just need to make sure before you claim that you are one, do all this research and make sure that you actually are one. So to me, that was like, you don't suffer enough. I suffer more than you. And that means that you're probably not. I don't think you are.
But I mean, like, I feel like that type of journey should just be on your own when you like your own discovery. If you're going to do research, do your own research. It shouldn't be up to somebody else to define that journey. I don't think anyone has a right to define anyone else's journey in life, regardless of where it leads to. Like, we can help people if they want help, but don't tell them this is how you should do it, because it's like it may be different for other people, and you got to respect that. But
I feel like judgment. We all have preconceived judgments. We all have judgments and stuff. However, I still try to come into every situation with every person with the least amount of judgment that I can, because I'm not them. I'm not in their shoes. I haven't experienced what they've experienced up until this point. And, I made a lot of mistakes in my life and I learned from them. And I wouldn't want to take the experience of learning away from those people if they I could give my input and be like, I don't think that's a good idea, and if they still choose to do it, more you learn from your mistakes. So I try to be very non-judgmental as often as I can. I know that it's ingrained in our system to judge, and especially as empaths, to protect ourselves with judgment and in that way.
So getting to learning from your own experiences, like I've gotten advice from a lot of people in my life about certain things, and then in those situations I will tend to overthink, and sometimes I will make mistakes where I will stay in a situation that might not be best for me because I feel like sometimes I have a hard time of letting go of people. I will admit that. I'll put it that way, where I want to stay in something, whether it be a friendship, whether it be in anything, and people say like, this isn't, this might not be good for you. You should think about it, right? And I probably shouldn't have said it that way. It sounds so like vague booking. My bad to anybody out there. Don't think it's you. I'm just giving an example. But in general, just like, I guess the best way to put it is sometimes I've allowed myself to stay in situations that weren't better for me because I hoped that things would change, and they didn't. And I've had people who have given me that advice to like get out of it. And you take that advice, but you have to learn from like your own experience. Like you have to make that mistake so you actually learn and soak it in. And so like I've learned from friends where I've had to tell them later on, like, hey, you were right. I should have listened better. I'll be more attentive to that and pay attention to, these situations. Thank you for that advice. And I'm sorry that I didn't like listen to it as well, or I wasn't as receptive to it as I should have been, but I appreciate you looking out for me. So I definitely agree with you that like I've definitely had my fair share of things, like experiences where I had to learn in the hard way. And I'm grateful for those experiences because it's taught me a lot about myself and like my own patterns and behaviors that I know I need to work on as a person.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be who you are today without having those experiences, even the worst ones. Like I wouldn't want to say that I want to be harassed again, but like I wouldn't have learned, maybe I would have learned what I needed to learn without having that happen. I just wasn't paying attention, and so the universe made that happen. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we kind of.
Oh, did my cat open my door? Wow, kudos to her. Sorry, I just realized that my door is open. My cat opened it. Let me close it again. I was like, wait a minute, something's different. Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Okay.
She's like this tiny little thing, and it's like for the past year, she'll like in the morning if I don't want to I don't want to let her out because like we've got 2 other cats and they like retreat when she does. So, but then she'll like do the whole like let me pull out the door as much as I can. And she's like right there. And all of a sudden today she just magically opened it. So now I'm like, I gotta come up with a new system to keep her out. Or like to keep her from opening the door. So I don't wake up at 3 a.m.
It wouldn't matter if she moves it up and down, right?
Well, no, my door doesn't have a lock. So yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out how else to barricade it. It's gonna be interesting.
Door. I mean put a chair against the door.
Definitely.
I got my brain shutting down already is not good. Okay, so I ask this question every time because it's more of like I don't really have boundaries and I need advice. So how do you create boundaries for yourself as an empath when you go out into the world, if you do?
Hi, I also have not learned how to make proper boundaries for myself, so nice to meet you. I think a lot of it, at least from my own personal experience and from like talking with other people who have been willing to listen to what I dub the TED Talks, where I go on my rants of trying to figure out myself and my life, of course. It's a lot of self-worth and a lot of understanding my own self-value and learning what like indicates my like how I value myself. And that's where my boundaries need to lie, is like how much do I value myself to get out of these situations or to not tolerate or accept what is happening to me, and vocalizing that. Because there are times where, I've been told this, I haven't fully grasped this. So for everybody out there who is giving me this advice, I'm sorry, I will admit this out loud in the open. I am working on dealing with my own self-value and self-worth. I have a lot of self-confidence issues that I know I need to work on and get better at. And in turn, that it's kind of led me now on this journey of learning how to actually create the boundaries of what I will accept and what I won't accept from friendships or from anything else. Another thing too is realizing that some friendships I need to learn that maybe they're not good for me, and if they're out of my life, then it's meant to be. If it's meant for that friendship to come back, then it will, and it will be a different path, and there will have to be boundaries set. But it's learning, just I think for me, boundaries really mean just how do you find what is your self-value to yourself, and what do you think you deserve? And if you feel like you don't deserve something, that becomes a boundary 100%. So like if somebody is insulting you or degrades you or whatever, then you know that the boundary is, hey, you don't get to do that, and if you don't accept that, I can't be friends with you because you don't respect me.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying is speaking up for yourself is a way of creating boundaries when you're
100%.
like, that's not okay with me. And instead of staying quiet and pushing it under the rug or letting people walk all over me, I'm going to call attention to it and be like, this is not okay. And that creates a boundary.
Yeah. And I think it's also just not being afraid to have those hard conversations and not being afraid to confront them. I think, I don't know if this is a thing a lot of people face. I'm sure that they do, but like, I don't like confrontation as much because I always worry if I bring up something, it's going to be like a big deal. And so my brain goes into overthink mode of like, okay, how do I say this exactly? What is the like right wording to where I don't create like a situation that can blow out of proportion? And then sometimes it's like I end up being the one to apologize because it's like I'd rather just be like, you have your perspective, and like I guess I'm sorry for what I've done, but it, you know, like, but it doesn't. But at the end of the day, it's like that doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't set the boundary. And it's learning just to be able to say stuff like using the terms I feel or I think and just relaying that information to someone, because it's more open to dialogue, and it's really more of like, let me tell you what I feel versus like, hey, this is what's going down. So definitely agree with you. By using the words like I feel, that's helped with creating like those conversations to create boundaries.
Yeah, it's really interesting because of like how something might be because you're an empath, but it might also just be because you're a human in the world. Because it's, we all have insecurities and we all overthink, but you know, like women really overthink. Not to say that men don't, but it's just like I find myself being, you know, with the not being sure sometimes if I'm an empath, because I'm like, well, the whole world overthinks, or like, you know, I'm not the only person who overthinks. But yeah, it's interesting because I you don't know necessarily if that's in the empath section or if that's in the just you're human in the world
Yeah.
section.
And that's why I think I still struggle with the concept of like empath, or even I guess like saying that I'm an empath or not, just because it's like I don't know. And I don't know if that is also part of the journey or not. It's like just how it is. Like that, yeah. It's like I just, like you said, it's hard to know where that line is and where the line gets towed. Because I do feel like sometimes, how do I put it? Because it is a new concept, sometimes I do wonder if that word, because the word isn't understood as well, like it's misunderstood and misused and other things. So that's another reason why I also struggle with it, is like, am I misusing it if I consider myself an empath? Because even I don't know if I am one. Am I one? Even if I've been told that. So I think that's where I also lie with like the term itself. And that's where my struggle has been too, is like understanding if I, again, like having that dialogue, internal dialogue of like, am I not, and am I misusing it, and where is the line drawn for me as like an empath versus a person of the world?
I've come to the conclusion for myself, which it just makes me feel better, is that it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks about the term. If I identify as one, that's what matters. That's the most important thing. So it's like, I think a lot of times I've started asking people, do you identify as one? Because that's not saying, are you one? Is this a fact? Is it not?
Right.
You know, just like, because it's all about, some labels are good, you know, like when I labeled myself as an empath, then it was like, oh, I have this community that I could reach out to get support, who are going through things that I thought I only went through, or, you know, I just didn't know. It's like when I first found some Facebook support groups for it, I was like, oh my gosh, I thought that was something that only I experienced. And like all these people are come and think about the same thing. And so it's a lot of times I feel like labels are they shut you in and they create walls around you. But depending on the label, it can really open up your world and make you feel seen and validated and heard. And I feel like that's how I try to use the term empath, and try not to care what other people think about it. But that's,
which is fair.
Yeah, I identify as being. So.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think that's great. Like, I do agree with you. I think, you know, in this day and age, labels can be, the labels have a duality to them, right? Like, there is good and then there is bad, depending on the context, connotation, and then how it's used. Like, some people unfortunately use labels in a derogatory manner, which is terrible, and sometimes they use it as a compliment. And it's one of those things where it's both restrictive, but it is, like you said, very open. And I'm glad to hear that the label of empath and finding yourself to be an empath has led you down this journey, because it sounds like it's led to a lot of inner growth, and that's a wonderful thing to have.
Yes, I agree. And it has, yeah. I mean, I think the last boss I had before the pandemic, I was in the car with him because he was showing me how to do something. And we had to go somewhere to do it. And I mentioned being an empath, and he's like, well, what does that mean? And internally, I was like, oh crap, now I have to figure out how to explain it. That is basically, I take on the emotions of other people, thinking they're my own. And told him a little bit about it. And then I had this, I don't know if this has anything to do with necessarily the talk we're having right now, but it was interesting because I was afraid to be sharing so much with my boss. And so I was like, I had this internal voice that was yelling at me. It was my fear being like, stop talking. Like this could get you fired. Like you're sharing too much. And when you share too much, things explode. And, so it was just like, I had to be like, whoa, but I couldn't stop. Like I still shared because I think maybe something within me knew it was a safe space and a safe environment, but my fear was coming from all of these bad experiences that I had when I'd overshared with friends and then they left me or dumped me, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like to some degree, being an empath, you can kind of get a good read on people. So like, how you get in your gut instinct who you think you can trust, who you can't trust. And it does help with that. Like knowing when you feel safe or when you feel like you're part of something, whether it's a group of friends or whether it's like a single person, it's nice to have that feeling in your gut that like, this is somebody that you can talk to. This is one of your people, one of your persons. And it makes it feel more, I feel like it's led to a lot of fulfilling friendships as a result of like knowing those people and knowing that they're a part of my tribe or my community, where it's like, cool, these are people that I can lean on when it comes to like my toughest days. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, I think I'm just starting to experience that because I didn't trust my gut the way that I should. And I don't like the word should, but
Right.
yeah, I was really letting my brain talk me down. So it was like, if I didn't like somebody's energy, I'd be like, well, I have no reason to not like I should give them a shot. Like you should give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Like,
right.
And so, yeah, I definitely have had a struggle with my heart and my head and my gut and my intuition and all of that. And so now I've learned, even if I was to get into a bad situation, listening to my gut and my intuition is more important than being like it. If the energy isn't right, that doesn't mean that the person is a bad person. Sometimes they are, but it doesn't always mean that. It just means that you don't go well together, whether that's friendship, working together, any kind of relationship in the world. And that's your body being like, this is not a good person for you specifically to be around, and this is us warning you. And you can't, that's not something that you can understand or know. You just have to trust it.
Yeah.
So now I'm finally starting to have better people in my life. It's the opposite. Like
there you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you said before, she's my sounding board on pretty much everything, and you're starting to become that as well because
I'm honored.
You, which I really, really appreciate because I need that. I'm starting to have good people in my life, but the whole point of me starting this conversation just now was it's interesting because I always connect very deeply. I can't really seem to stop that, even when it's not necessarily healthy. But it's when you have friends who identify or consider themselves as empaths, it's a different kind of connection. And it's the kind of connection that I've been looking for my entire life, because it's like I've been surrounded up until now by people who couldn't go as deep as I just go on a daily basis emotionally. And or couldn't understand why I did that. It's always because I'm a Gemini, like you're the twin, you're either crazy or you're not. Like it just so it's nice to be seen and heard and validated. And I'm like, please bring in more wonderful people like this. They aren't empaths. I almost said Gemini. Even if empaths, I just, but it is interesting because I notice that I connect and am drawn to and want to spend all of my time and bouncing my emotions and all of that off of fellow empaths, even if I don't know they are one, or even if they might not identify as one. Because that's actually one of the questions that I have. Have you ever thought of somebody, thought somebody was an empath, but they personally didn't identify as one, or thought somebody who identified as an empath actually wasn't one? In your opinion, because of course, like we said, it's not fact.
Right. Honestly, I think I have a lot of people in my life who are like that. Like I've my best friend who's like a brother to me. Who like we went to high school together, and then well, we went to high school for a year together, and then I went to a different high school, and then we didn't talk for like a few years because I just kind of lost touch. And then he popped back into my life, and we've been best friends ever since, or like rekindled our friendship. He's so intuitive of other people, very perceptive, very kind-hearted. It's a great listener by far, and just gives you compassion like crazy. It's the type of guy where you feel like he would do everything to make you smile in whatever capacity he could. I don't know if he labels as an empath. I don't think we've never had that conversation, but in my eyes, undoubtedly, he's definitely an empath. There's a few others too who that I've really grown more into like a circle with, like one of my circles, I'll say, of like people that I spend time with, who feels like they're all empaths in their own right, because they're so intuitive of like how things feel. And the beauty of their friendship too is they're not afraid to have those conversations. So like there have definitely been the hard conversations, but it's made those friendships stronger. It's made those friendships like, I don't know, like, how do I put it? Like it's like putting armor on it, like hammering steel on it or something. I don't know. Where it's like it feels like they've been reforged into something better than what they were. And I appreciate that for what it is. So I do think that even if they're not empaths, I'm surrounded by a lot of very compassionate people, and I'm very grateful for that. And that's why I'm glad that you're having that now as somebody who labels as an empath and is able to find people that they're drawn to where even if they don't know that they're an empath or they don't label themselves as one, they're still compassionate, kind-hearted people. Like you can never have enough of those people in your life.
Yeah, definitely. I'm creating my spiritual family.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing too is you talk about conversation like being deep. I'm somebody who some people have joked that I overshare. Like on my Facebook wall, like you'll see me like talk about like how I might be struggling with something, or how like I'm giddy as a school kid about something, or like or even just like in basic conversations, instead of like how are you doing, instead of just saying the casual like good, I'm like good, I went through this, I was struggling with this, but now I'm doing better with this. And for me it's like and this isn't a criticism of anyone, it's I love in-depth conversation. I'm somebody that wants to be just not just like the casual of like good or fine or okay, because I'm like I don't know how to work with that. I don't know how to bounce off of that. Like, what type of conversation should I be having here? Do I just keep asking questions until like one hits the nail and I'm like, ah, cool. Like I can now talk about this. That's great. It's like for me, it's I want to know how you're actually doing. Like it's not, I don't want this to be a formality. It's I want to get to know you as a person because I vibe with you, or like I feel your energy, and this is what I like. This is a friendship that I want to cultivate, so I'm gonna want to know more. So I totally get that about like being deep and wanting to like have deep conversations.
Yeah, on a bunch of I'm in a bunch of empath pages, and one of the things that's always on it is that well, oversharing. You know, like you overshare a lot. And oh, there was one other specific thing that you had said that that made me think of it. Now it's going away. I hate it when that happens.
It's all good.
Feels so important. And it happens all the time. Man, yeah, I hate it, especially because I was like, oh, I could touch on that. I could add to it. And my brain's like, no, you're done.
You know,
Add
if
to that.
anything, you can just interrupt me and then you can like go off of that and I'll totally be fine with that. So
I
by all
don't
means, just
want to interrupt, but I will.
yeah. You just like objection or like stop. I'll be like, okay, wait, let's talk about what?
I don't want you to like summarize what you just said, because it felt like I wanted to
Okay, to try to summarize, I guess I tend to be an oversharer both in like on my social media and to add more depth to that, like I feel like social media, we have this idea that we can only make it look like we're doing good in life. Like it's almost like, let me just share all the good stuff because hey, that like that's what we do. But for me, it's like I've had people tell me before where they're happy that I will share stuff because it's like it shows them where I'm at, and sometimes people have checked in to see how I'm doing, and it's led to some really good in-depth conversations. So to further go on.
It did make me think of something.
Okay.
So yeah, I've actually kind of had the opposite. But it hasn't been, it might be a generational thing because it's like, although my sister, and she's only 3 years older than me, but I used to share everything on my Facebook. I'm addicted to Facebook. And everybody's like, she's sharing too much. My sister's in-laws were like worried I was going to commit suicide. It was never that bad. I'm just sharing how I feel. Like this is just, but nobody else does that. So then it's like, oh my gosh, she's going through this really rough time. And I was depressed for 3 years. And so I had been told for years, like, you really need to stop sharing only share the good stuff, like, because it's just, it's not safe for you to share this other stuff. And then of course now I have a couple empath friends who are like, fuck that, share what you want to share. Like, this is your page, do whatever the hell you want.
Yes.
Again, more generations. So it's, but yeah, it's just, and it did get me into a bad situation once. So I do try to not share as much all over the place. Like I used to be like, oh, I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with this person or whatever. And then it would get back to the person. And then so even though I knew who the person was, it was still bad. Yeah.
Well, I get that. I mean, there is a level in which I try, like, I know if I'm sharing something, it's like trying to think of like, okay, what is a safe way to like express it? What is a way that won't cause rifts or whatever, where it's like, look, I'm struggling with this because, like, and really talking more about like my internal struggles to where it's like, here's just what I am going through. And that's what led me to wanting to do what I'm hoping still helps people, or if they think it helps them, I hope it does in some capacity, is like I try to do a thing on Tuesdays called like mental health check on Tuesdays, just because like for me it's like what I wanted to do with it and what I hope it's done is I wanted to make it a space for people to be able to share stuff that they may be struggling with, where others can reach out and like offer advice or do whatever, or even if it's just like a check-in saying thank you, like, for checking in. I just wanted to build a space where people could feel like they are comfortable enough to share whatever they wanted to share and feel connected with others. Because I know for me that like when I struggle, because I will admit, like, there are a lot of times where I struggle, especially during this quarantine, where I've had to lean on people hard and tell them like, look, I'm going through something right now. Like, I need someone here to talk to. And I am grateful for those people. There've been a lot of people who have done that for me. And, I can never say thank you enough to those people, because it helped me to work through things to where it was like, I was okay because now I know where I'm at, and it's going to take time for me to grow and to heal from that. But I'm grateful that those people gave me a chance to start the healing process from it. Okay. Sorry, I hear my cat like getting the handle again, so I'm going to see if she can open it. But what was I getting at? All that to say is like, I get it. It's one of those 2 times. Look at you. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by my cat because she just like
be a part of you.
Wow, look at you. You did it. oh, you're not even looking at me. You're just like, Dad, I want food. You got food. Don't worry.
Cats,
Yeah.
the bosses of life.
Pretty much. Yeah. So sorry to go on a different tangent. Forgive me for this, but like on the trip to Kentucky that I just came back from, it was so funny because I was just like, I've got my own bed. I don't have like a cat to like take up the bed to where I'm being pushed like into my wall into oblivion. And then 2 days into the trip, I'm like, dang, I really miss my cat. Like, I don't know what it is, but I miss her. Like, and it's just funny because like she'll do this thing where she'll like get in my arm, and then she'll like she'll do the kangaroo kick to like make it open just enough for her to nestle in. So like I'll be laying down and it's like a little curve, and I'll just be holding her in there. And then if I like try to adjust or if I need to get up, she'll do this whole like realize I'm getting up and then put her paws over like this, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll stay here just for you. I'm uncomfortable, but I'll stay here if it means you're comfortable. It's fine. But yeah, to try to get back to what we were talking about, I know for me that like when I do overshare, like a lot of it is crafted in a sense of like, let me focus more on what I'm experiencing from it and try to keep it that way. So that way it's not like the risk of somebody going like, oh, so you talking about this or talking about that, and be like, none of your business. Let's not talk about that. So yeah.
That's a good way to put it, like what you're feeling in the situation, but not necessarily the situation exactly.
Yeah, because like for me, it's when I feel like if I do that for myself, it's like when people offer any suggestions or any advice or like they reach out, it's really more focusing on what can I learn from it and how can I grow from this without like putting too much context into it to where it's like, because for me, it's in any situation, regardless of like how I feel about it, I know there's always two sides to a story. And what I'm experiencing is valid in its own right because those are that's my own personal experience. It's my own emotion. That's what I've been through. But I also know that they have their own version of the story or that whole entire situation, maybe their own experience. So it's not my right to put it in a way where that person either sees it in the way that I've painted it to where it's like, I don't want them to have a negative light of that person because of what I went through. Because it's not fair to the other person. They're not there to tell their side of the story. They're not there to defend themselves. So I try, and I mean, I will admit, I'm human. I've definitely shared stories with people where, like, unintentionally, I have created, a bad light. And when I've talked to those people and hopefully have apologized or done it to where hopefully, even if we didn't end up as friends anymore, at least we had that discussion. But my goal in any conversation is really to focus more on what I've been through, and not casting a light on somebody else because I don't think it's ever fair. Because if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't want that to happen to me.
That makes a lot of sense. It's in all of the bad friendships and toxic friendships I've had, I'm always putting myself into their shoes. I always understand where they're coming from, and it doesn't excuse their behavior or how they treated me, but I'm very aware and able to understand where they're coming from, even when I was being asked by somebody. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I don't like to use the term crazy, but
yeah, well, I get it. I mean, it's one of those things where you can provide context to understand where a person's coming from. That doesn't admonish them of what they've done. That doesn't say like they didn't do something to you. It's simply just saying, I respected that person as a whole, the person that is just as complex as I may be, but this is something that they did do to me, and this is what I felt. And so I think there's a distinction that I feel like for me personally, I always want to be aware of is like, no matter what experience I may have had with them, they're a whole other person. Other people know them differently, and it's not my right to cast them in any way, especially if they don't know the person too. Like, what if they meet them in the future and then they're like, oh, so you're that like butthead or whatever it may be that like I've heard about. And it's like, it wouldn't be right because who knows, maybe they grew in those years. Maybe they've become a better person. And in that time, like for someone to hold that light on them, it would be unfair because it just sets a bad precedent of like later on. So
I agree. So we haven't really gotten into this yet, but I figure we have a male empath. We might as well. I only know the experience of being a female empath, and I know that especially in society, it's even I would assume it's harder for men because they're not allowed to have emotions. Because we're allowed to have emotions as female, but then we have too much of an emotion or too intense of an emotion because then we're too overly emotional and it's excessive and intense and too much. So we're allowed to be sensitive but not too sensitive, whereas men are supposed to rub dirt in it and just not experience it with each other or in the, at least that's how it comes across to me. So I'm curious of kind of like your journey, but then also like just your experience as a male man identifying with empath as a term.
So I don't know if I can really speak for like a male empath journey, because I feel like maybe mine, at least from my experience, I've been surrounded by a lot of people who are very open and very receptive and very compassionate. So I've never really had to worry about having that whole like just like put dirt in it and call it a day. Like I've really had a lot of people who, even if they're not the same as me, where they don't share as much or they're not really into talking as much, they've always been willing to listen. And we've always been able to have conversations to where they know how I function. So they're willing to work with that. And I'm grateful for that experience, because it's like, I am an emotional person. My emotions are what like I experience all the time. And I don't want to deny that, because I know when I was younger, like in my own experience, when I bottled up my own childhood like issues and stuff like that, when the bottle broke, it broke. I mean, it was bad. There was fallout. There was a lot of things that I'm grateful they didn't go the way that they did, that they could have. And it made me learn from that. Like, to bottle up my emotions for me could be devastating for me in the future. There's a heavy price to pay when you suppress your emotions and what you feel. Like, it's better to face them up front and to be open with yourself, even if you don't feel like you can open up to other people. Because I know, like, again, introverted, extroverted, some people are better at like keeping it to themselves, others bounce off of other people. To deny those emotions, I think, will do long-term mental toil and like will hurt your mental health. It's not a good thing to suppress it. I feel like I'm a firm believer of like, regardless of what gender you may be, you need to be able to validate your feelings. Because if you feel like if you constantly invalidate them, if you constantly suppress them, if you don't admit something either hurt you or made you happy or whatever it may be, who knows what type of damage you don't see that will come out in the long run. It may be little like cracks, but those little cracks are going to lead to something bigger at some point. So
not healthy.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if my experience qualifies as like a male empath experience. I just know for me, it's been a unique path in a sense, or maybe not unique. Maybe it is a generational thing. Maybe it's not. Whatever it may be, I've been lucky to have friends where we have open conversations about our mental health and where we're at. And funnily enough, a lot of those are men too, where we talk about our struggles. And
wonderful.
Yeah, so it's been great, and I'm lucky to have that group. Like last night, we were playing games together, we played games last night. I told them they were like family to me because they've become like brothers to me. But even more so, like when I got back from Kentucky and I was trying to just detox from how I felt, I told them that night, like, I don't know how to tell you this other than thank you for listening, because I was struggling. They're like, and it warmed my heart to know that they could say something like, you were going through some is it okay to cuss? I'm like trying to hold back, and okay. They're like, it was literally just like, we know that you were going through some shit, because that was a really shitty. There was a lot of shitty stuff that you were going through, and this is what we're here for, because you would do the same for us. And it was like, and it was just heartwarming, because it was like, okay, I know that I'm safe, and I'm lucky. So I'm grateful for them, and I'm glad that I have that type of group of friends, and even my other groups of friends that I have. Like, a lot of the people that I have around me are willing to listen and are very compassionate, to where I hope that they feel they can do the same with me, but I know I can talk to them about my struggles.
That's wonderful. And I think that it is valid because you are a male and you identify as an empath. So even if it's not like every other empath male,
Mhm.
it is valid because it's your experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm constantly invalidating my own emotions, and she's helping.
I know, it's like, I got to make sure I'm using my other hands. It's like,
but yeah, so I'm constantly in need of other people validating my emotions until I can validate them for myself.
mhm.
That's actually, I think, why I've been struggling the past couple of weeks. Three big things happened in my life that I'm not going to share publicly, but
Right.
yeah, but it was like they all happened at once. And for two of them, I was invalidating everything that I was feeling, because I shouldn't be feeling this way, and all of this stuff. And so and I was pushing people away, which I don't normally do. With my friends, I'm like, oh, this is what's going on. I'm always like
Right.
over expressing, and this time, like, I felt very guilty, and it was just really intense. And so I'm all about validation, because I know
Right.
that we're experiencing everything we're feeling is valid because we're feeling it.
Mhm.
It's just society that makes us feel like we're not allowed to have it. And I think that's amazing. And maybe for you, and maybe it really is, things are going in the right direction, and our generation is going to start changing things for the better, because that would be wonderful. And I know that there's so many other big issues and stuff happening right now. But this is important to me. This is close to my heart. So I feel like I want to do this. And I was discouraged recently with, people bailing all the time. So I've lost a little momentum, and decided it's almost, an hour. So I've decided that we're probably going to take a break until January. So for the holidays and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I only have like two other guys. Although Angela could come back if she was interested, which she probably is. And, I'm sure I could find a couple people, but
Mhm.
you seem to have a plethora, it sounds like, of people who might be empaths. So if you have a conversation with them and send them my way, then I could have more people to interview.
Sure.
But
I'll talk to them and see if they want to. Definitely.
yeah, it'd be great. Because this time we had two people in and out, and then we've had zero for a while. And I think people do watch it, but it's definitely not very many. Yeah, let's just say yet.
But I'm glad that you're doing this, even if it's not like a lot of people watching or whatever it may be. Like, at the end of the day, if one person stumbles upon it and they feel like they feel it, or it resonates with them, at least we help that one person. Or even if it's just something for like you or
Good
me.
job.
I said the you just to cover my bases, just in case if I forgot how I was pointing. So like, I'm just gonna do that.
You work.
If it's something that like we can go back exactly something this way or another. It's even if it's something that we can something that we can go back to and we can like look back on and maybe find something, we can glean something new. It's always helpful in some way or another. So like I think that this is very valuable, and I thank you for starting these conversations, because it's been fun.
Thank you. That means so much to me, and I'm so happy that you're our first guy.
Well, thank you.
Guys, you need to be the first one. It's just there was something I was like, it needs to be him. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to, yeah, so I guess we don't have a date for the next one because I feel like it's good with the holidays to just kind of
Yeah.
give a little break anyway because people are busy. And so I'm going to end it there, but we'll all still stick here. I'll just push end.
Okay.
And thank you so much for being our very first male empath interviewee.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a treat.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm happy with it. And so we'll see everybody for the next video. Bye.
Have a good holidays, everyone.